The following podcast may not be for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
In the winding canals of old Bangkok, where ancient banyan trees cast long shadows across murky waters, mothers still whisper a story to their children. It is a tale of love so powerful that it defied death itself. This legend is so deeply woven into Thailand's culture that even today people leave offerings at a shrine, hoping to appease the spirit of a woman who refused to leave the world. This is the story of a woman who loved her husband so much she couldn't let him go, even in death. Unlike the sugar-coated ghost stories you've heard before, this one breeds terror into every telling. In this episode, we explore one of Thailand's most infamous ghost stories. So follow me into the unexplained realms, where the eternal love of Mae Nak bleeds through the veil between life and death. In the late 1800s, in a small village along the Phra Nang Canal, a young woman named Mae Nak was deeply in love with her husband, Tik Tok. The loving couple became pregnant and would prepare to welcome their first child into the world. During the pregnancy, Tik Tok was called away to war. He was terrified to leave his wife and unborn child, but Mae Nak promised him she and the baby would be just fine and waiting for him when he came home. While away at war, Tik Tok's worst nightmare came to life. Mae Nak went into labor and died during childbirth. But death, it seems, was merely an inconvenience for her. When Tik Tok returned, he went to his house but was stopped by a neighbor. He was not aware his wife and child had died. The neighbor pleaded with Tik not to go into the house and explained that unspeakable things were occurring there. Tik Tok did not believe the neighbor and pushed past him. A newborn baby awaited him. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect. Mae Nak watched her husband's smile grow wider as she served his favorite soup, her ghostly hand steady on the clay bowl. She treasured Tik Tok's joy at seeing their baby sleeping peacefully, but grieved his warm touch, which she could no longer truly feel. Only in the darkest hours, when the temple bells toll and her husband is asleep, does she allow herself to remember the truth that she and their child slipped away during childbirth, leaving only these pale imitations behind, bound to earth by a love too strong to die. The villagers whispered behind cupped hands, their dark eyes with worry. They saw how Tik Tok's wife cradled their infant in the candlelight and hummed lullabies in the dead of night. They knew Tik Tok refused to see his beloved wife and child had died months ago, and the ones who were in his home were nothing more than shadows wearing familiar faces, and their feet never quite touching the ground. One day, Mae Nak was lost in her love of cooking for her beloved Tik Tok. She was preparing a dish that required lime juice. While working with the lime, it fell and rolled across their wooden floor. It landed in the gap between the floorboards. She reached down without thinking, her arms elongated like water flowing downward, stretching impossibly through the floorboards. Her ghostly fingers went through the wooden floor. It was only when she heard Ti Ma's sharp intake of breath behind her that she realized her mistake. In that moment, as natural as breathing had once been, she had shattered the fragile illusion they both desperately clung to. Mae Nak turned to face her husband, the lime still clutched in her ghostly hand, and saw in his horror-stricken eyes that the whispered truths he'd denied for so long had finally taken root. Her love, the force that kept her tethered to this world, was terrified of her. The night was a shroud of shadows as Tik Tok ran away from the house, his heart pounding louder than his footsteps on the dirt path. He dared not look back, but he could feel Mae Nak's presence like a chill in the air. Relentless and sorrowful, she was pursuing him. Once sweet and comforting, her voice now echoed through the darkened village, yelling to him, "You promised always to love me." When Tik Tok finally gathered the courage to look back, his blood turned to ice. Where his beautiful Mae Nak had stood was something else entirely, a grotesque apparition of rage and betrayal. Her once gentle face had twisted into a mask of fury, and her flowing black hair writhed in a wind that touched nothing else. Those eyes that had once looked at him with such tenderness now blazed with supernatural hatred, glowing with an unholy fire that pierced the darkness. This was no longer his beloved wife who had cooked his favorite meals and sung their baby to sleep. This was Mae Nak, the vengeful spirit. Raw with the pain of abandonment, her love corrupted into something ancient and terrible. At that moment, Tik Tok understood why the villagers had trembled when they spoke of her. Tik Tok's breath came in ragged gasps as he sprinted through the night, his only hope lying in the myths he'd heard whispered. He stumbled into a grove of blumia, their leaves brushing against his skin like a protective cloak. Tik Tok crouched beneath them, praying the tales were true, that these humble leaves could ward off spirits. Mae Nak's pursuit faltered as she approached the grove, her form wavering at its edge, her love tethered to Tik Tok. Yet the leaves held her at bay, a barrier she could not cross. Tik Tok's heart ached, knowing she was tormented, but survival drove him onward. He fled through the night, the temple of Wat Mahabut looming like a beacon of salvation. With the last of his strength, Tik Tok crossed its threshold, the sacred ground offering refuge from the spectral grasp of his once beloved wife. Mae Nak lingered at the temple's edge. In the flickering candlelight of the temple, Tik Tok fell at the monk's feet, his words tumbling out between ragged breaths. The monk, wizened and serene despite the chaos unfolding beyond the temple walls, listened as Tik Tok spoke of his ghostly wife, of love turned to terror, of a spirit's rage that threatened to consume him whole. The holy man's eyes grew grave as he understood the magnitude of what haunted his temple's doorstep. Drawing upon ancient knowledge passed down through generations of Buddhist masters, he began his sacred work. Incense smoke wound through the air like ethereal ropes. Mae Nak's furious screams echoed through the temple grounds as the monk's power was stronger. Her spectral form writhed and twisted, fighting against powers older than death itself. until her spirit was trapped in a jar. And so Mae Nak's jar found its way to the royal family, passed from one generation to another to ensure its safekeeping. Even now, they say on nights when the moon hangs full and low, the jar trembles, a reminder that love, even in death, refuses to be forgotten. Today, incense smoke curls through the air at Mae Nak's shrine in Phra Kanang, where gifts of flowers pile up like colorful offerings to a bittersweet love story. Locals whisper she's still there, watching from behind the veil between worlds. Young mothers come to lay bright flowers and cradle tiny dolls in their arms, gifts for the ghost who loved too deeply to leave. Couples kneel to light candles, perhaps seeing in Mae Nak's tale a dark mirror of their own devotion. The shrine keepers tend to these offerings with careful reverence, knowing that each gift helps maintain the delicate peace between our world and hers. Modern Bangkok rises around the shrine like a concrete forest, but Mae Nak's story remains unchanged within these sacred walls. Each offering is a promise, and each prayer is a gentle reassurance. We remember your love, honor your pain, and please rest in peace. Even in Thailand, some of the most terrifying spirits were once simply human hearts that loved too much to let go. The tale of Mae Nak echoes through centuries. It's a reminder that death and love dance an eternal waltz in the shadows. She experienced a love that was too enduring to die, but bound by the laws of the afterlife. Some say the veil between our world and hers grows thinner each year. Perhaps Mae Nak's vengeful spirit still searches for her beloved Ti Ma. Or perhaps she watches us, waiting for another chance to find what death so cruelly stole from her. Sleep well, dear listeners. But if you hear a woman's screams in the dark or catch the scent of rotting flesh masked by sweet jasmine, don't look. Some love stories are better left in the shadows where they belong.